Okay, I believe we're live. So thank you everyone who is tuning in today for this Center for Pharmacy Practice Innovation Lunch and Learn. We're excited to have you and excited to have this topic to speak on healthy living habits. We have a great panel prepared and a great moderator. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to them so we can make the most of our time. So just real quickly, our moderator is Ace Colwood. He is a mediator, moderator, what have you for Envoy. I'm going to let him do a much better job of introducing himself than that, but go ahead and take it away, Ace.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate everyone tuning in. Again, Center for Pharmacy Practice Innovation Lunch and Learn, which means you get to hang out with us all for an hour and maybe learn something over your, I'm sure, healthy lunch, given that we're talking about healthy living habits. I will talk about me last. We've got an incredible panel. Lauren called us. We've got Abigail Conley, Samantha Haswell, and Shanika. Let me make sure I got this right. He just told me how to pronounce his last name. Singha. Is that ish? I was close. I love it. Welcome. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. About me, I'm a facilitator is the very short. I am an alum of VCU, so go Rams. I spend a lot of my time running my mouth, but I think in this context, I will be doing more listening from the experts. And really my job is to make sure that we are hearing from the best of the best and moving the conversation forward. So I spend my time at a little firm called Envoy, just over the river on the bad side of town, Forest Hill, and really excited to be back to moderate another lunch and learn for CPPI, excuse me. With that, let's jump into quick intros. And on my screen, I see Lauren first. So Lauren, who are you? Why are you here?
Sure. So hi, I'm Lauren Caldas. I'm an associate professor at VCU School of Pharmacy, and I'm here today to really talk about any of the medications of healthy living, just kind of thinking from a pharmacy standpoint. I have other sort of interests, as I'm sure I'll tag in as I talk about different other healthy living that we like to do and just thinking of our lifestyle holistically. But really, I'm here to represent pharmacy.
Love it. Thank you, Lauren, and welcome, Abigail. Talk to us.
Hi, thank you all for having me. I am Abigail Conley. I'm an associate professor in the School of Education in the Department of Counseling and Special Education. So I'm a mental health counselor, and my area of research and kind of what I focus on is wellness counseling and looking at sort of holistic health through a counseling lens.
Love it. Welcome, Abigail and Samantha. Why are you here?
Hi, everyone. I'm Samantha Haswell. I'm the outpatient oncology dietitian over at VCU's Massey Cancer Center. And I'm here to talk about, healthy eating and how you go about improving your overall diet for wellness.
Love it. Thanks for joining us, Samantha. Shanika, last but certainly not least, my friend, Shanika.
Hey guys, so I'm a faculty member at School of Pharmacy, and I'm also a biochemist. So I study a lot of lipid metabolism and all of that. But the reason I'm here today is not because of that. I also have diabetes. I had diabetes with a H1C of 6.8 before COVID began. And COVID kind of gave me a little bit of an opportunity to change my lifestyle a little bit. And through moderating my diet, taking the right exercise, COVID safe exercises and all of that, I managed to get myself to A1C of 5.6. So if I can do it, anyone else can do it.
Well, kudos, Shanika. As I saw a little hand clap from Lauren. That's incredible. So we're talking about healthy living habits today. Again, I mentioned probably over a lunch of whatever we found close to us. So there are a couple elements of healthy living habits. We've got diet, we've got exercise, and then kind of your healthcare routine. And I want to kind of start there. Healthy can mean a lot of things to a lot of different people. What does that actually look like? And I'd imagine that is tailored for who you are, how you live, where you work, et cetera. So what does that mean? I see maybe Lauren's hand kind of going up. Was that, well, you're on the spot now. Lauren, you're kicking us off. What is healthy?
It was not going up. I just was kind of sitting with my hands like this, being like, oh, these are great questions.
Well, you
so
just
I
volunteered
even
yourself.
thought I wanted to hear Sam's part about diet, but I will tell you for pharmacy, what healthy looks like is if you are on medication, to be consistent with this. And I think what you'll hear a lot from everyone as they talk about different consistencies is that we take our medications that we have been prescribed on a routine basis. And even when it's hard, even when we're tired, even when we just don't feel like treating what's going on, consistently staying on those medications and letting your doctors and your prescribers know what you're taking so that we can make sure they work well together. I don't prescribe to everyone doing all these herbal supplements and a whole bunch of them. And I'm going to let Sam mention on that. I think this can get you into trouble, but if you're with someone who has been trained to do this in a safe way, it can work very nicely. But this is probably a good transition. Usually healthy eating is enough for that. So I'll let Sam take it away from here.
Thanks, Lauren. All right, guys,
So
I'm going to see.
Lauren is facilitating for me. I love that. We're going to diet now. So Sam, you're up.
All right, thank you, guys. I'm going to attempt to share a little part of my screen so you guys can see this as I talk. Is it showing up for all of you?
It is. Healthy plate.
Okay. So like Lauren was saying, definitely taking your meds is super important, and diet doesn't replace that. Over time, maybe it can with the combination of your pharmacist and doctor working with you, but do not stop your meds, even if your A1C is looking really good or your cholesterol looks really good. Wait till your doctor, your pharmacist says that you can stop before you just go for that. But from a diet perspective, this plate here is usually the method we use to talk about diet with our patients. Generally, one way to look at things is the typical American diet tends to focus on the protein and the starches. To lead yourself more towards healthy living, one way to do that is really focusing on instead those non-starchy vegetables and those fruits. So usually for healthy diet, for diabetes, general living, you want to try to focus on having about half your plate full of those delicious non-starchy vegetables. You know, you can have them baked, sauteed, however you like them, but those are going to have the least amount of calories. They're going to have fiber, and they're going to have tons of nutrients that your body needs, like vitamins, minerals, and antioxidants. You want about a quarter of that plate to be your protein, and this can be different for everybody. So for some people, if you are a regular meat eater, that can be, a lean piece of steak, that could be fish, that can be chicken. But if you're vegan, that might mean you do beans and then you make sure to pair it with rice to make a complete protein, or you have some tofu on your plate. Or if you're vegetarian, you like eggs, you can do eggs for your protein. But the point is to kind of portion that to be a quarter of your plate instead of the typical American plate where it can be a third or more. Same thing with your starches. As much as a pasta dinner can be great, doing a pasta dinner for every single meal is not the best way to eat. It can make your A1C high, it can make your blood sugar really high, and you want to watch for that. So instead, try to limit those starches to about a quarter of your plate for your healthy eating on most days. If you are really in the mood for some fettuccine Alfredo with chicken, go for it. It's not going to make or break your healthy living. But generally, you want to make sure you're mostly getting in those vegetables in and things like that to help keep a healthy weight and also get your nutrients in. And then dairy and fruit can always be part of a healthy diet as well.
I love that. And sorry to cut you off. I wanted to get, I know we've talked about diabetes a couple times already. We're like, 7 minutes in. So can you define A1C for the audience? Sam, do you mind doing that?
So A1C is a 3-month marker of how your blood sugars have been doing. If I remember correctly, and someone correct me if I'm wrong, I believe a 6.4 or higher means you are unfortunately into kind of a diabetic range. Am I right in that, Ace? Do you remember? Laura,
I've got nods from.
No, you're
the
there.
other two
So if
experts.
you're at so you'll have two different numbers when this is when the pharmacy comes in. You'll have two different numbers when we're worrying about blood glucose, blood sugar, or diabetes. So you have that instant test, which most people are going to see are going to be in the hundreds of some sort. Or you have these smaller tests that are usually done at a provider's office of some type. And that's what this A1C, you said it perfectly. It's a 3-month average of how you've been doing with your blood sugar just overall. It's really cool. And I won't get into the particulars of how we figure it out, but it's really neat if you're into chemistry. And so, but essentially you're right. Anything in a 5.8 to a 6.4, we term pre-diabetes. Anything that's 6.5 or above, we term as diabetes. Now, if you have diabetes, you get different goals depending on a lot of factors of what your number should become with medication and diet changes. And they're not all equal in the sense that we take into account your age, where you're starting, progression of the disease. It gets a little complex.
Great. Great. So Lauren, while I have you, you started talking about consistency in meds. We just unpacked what our plate should look like perhaps and how we ought to think about diet. And then Abigail, I'm coming to you next to talk about your thing, which is mental wellness. But before that, Lauren, preventative care, checking in with your doc. I know one of the things we talked about the last time I was here is how your pharmacist should be like a regular part of your kind of mix of care. So talk to me about when we should be checking in, how we can do that, and what kind of preventative care does for us in the grand scheme of things.
So great, because as you said that, Ace, when we were talking, I was sitting here making notes, being like, we need to mention at some point that people should get just some sort of annual or some sort of checkout appointment. So a lot of us, depending on the age demographic watching here, if you went through high school and you did sports, you got like the annual like sports physical. And then we get into the world and we just kind of forget to check back in and keep monitoring it. And then if you're like some of my family members, you get to your 30s and 40s and you're like, you haven't seen a doctor in how long? So you need to go at some point and get these wellness, annual physical, some kind. If you're plugged into a university like VCU, you have student health. If there's different opportunities for this, depending on if you're insured, if you're not insured, and these are great resources we can always plug individuals in. And then when we think of just, well, I don't have time to go to the doctor, but I want to just see how my blood pressure runs in my family, blood sugar issues run in my family. These are great things that you can do at any of your pharmacies. It depends on the pharmacy and their testing allowances, but almost all of them have some sort of blood pressure machine. You can throw your arm in and then go talk to the pharmacist. They've been trained on how to manage your disease, so they can tell you all about it and anything you may want to know. I know at my pharmacy, before I joined academia, I had blood sugar stations where we would just test people on certain days of the week to be able to screen individuals as they were coming in and out of the Kroger and see how their blood sugar was going. So there's a lot of opportunities for that as well. So looking for that, whether they're health clinics or asking your pharmacy if they ever run those or if they know anyone who does. It's a great way to get a free check-in just to see how you're doing, because as I'm sure everyone can say, a lot of these diseases that are these chronic diseases based on lifestyle and a lot of our genetics, we don't know we have them until much later in the disease where something much more serious happens. So these regular check-ins catch you from having these as a problem.
I love that. And it sounds like we should go back to sports physicals kind of regularly for all of us, sports or otherwise. And we stopped doing that. So it sounds like getting something on the books at a regular cadence, but also some like micro touch points. Are you popping to the pharmacy, you check your blood pressure, et cetera, could be a really good way to make sure you're not missing anything and we're staying on top of it. Abigail, I said we're coming to you. Mental health, mental wellness feels like a generational thing. I like my students in the School of Business, my students at the Da Vinci Center seem like on top of it. Gen Z, tail end millennials are like, mental health is important. But I've seen that shift happen in the last maybe 5 years. Talk to me about why we should be thinking about mental health in the context of health in general and how we can do that a little better.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you. I also have seen such a shift just, really, like you said, in the past maybe 5-6 years of even my students being so comfortable with being upfront about how they take care of their mental health. And I think that that's such an exciting change that's happening because going with, some of this great information that we've been talking about, education and knowing what to do is part of it. And then having the intention and motivation to continue to make those choices is what goes hand in hand with that. And I loved hearing your story, Shanka, about you changing your levels, because in that story, I heard a lot of motivation that you kind of got this number and you felt like, okay, now, there's this kind of perfect time to really work on that in this little pause with COVID. And so there's something about you within you that had the motivation to make those changes. And also what I'm guessing is as you started to see positive changes, that reinforced it and building. So I think the mental health piece is really important to help us in like what we talk about with what healthy is. It's sort of this holistic, right? Our mind, body, spirit, emotions, connection, that those things are integrated. And so I think it's really important for everyone to have some sense of how some of those connections might be enhanced for themselves. So if they're working on their body wellness, which is about diet and physical activity, connecting their emotional wellness to that, right? So if you want to change the way you eat, maybe a good way to do that is just to start by, noticing how you feel when you eat. And noticing how food makes your body feel, how different food makes your body feel. Because the more in tune you are to, that good food makes your body feel good, the more reinforcing that is to continue to eat food that's good for you, and same for moving your body and that type of thing. So I just think it's an important layer to add on to really bring all of ourselves, our whole selves into the change process for a healthier life.
So housing, a baguette and a half at lunch and wanting to fall asleep afterwards, I ought to be thinking about how that makes me feel and what the triggers perhaps are for why I did that and why and how I can maybe stop. I love that. So we've got now this holistic kind of view of how we might orient to health. I want to dig into some of the tangible, like how do I think, Abigail, at the tail end, you mentioned, I wrote it down, intention and motivation. So I want to talk about setting goals and like how I start navigating the process of being a little healthier. And I'd love all of you to kind of touch in your respective fields on how we start benchmarking and seeing if we're making progress and what we should do incrementally to be a little better. So I will go back to top corner of my screen. Lauren, kick us off there.
It's a great question. So as I was thinking about it, it's so personal with if someone's on a medication regimen, it's so personal what their journey really is. So benchmarks are going to be personal as well. So I'll give examples instead. So, depending on the demographic, if we have someone on, we'll say birth control, taking it the exact same time every day is so important to it actually working. You really have, if you ever look at the data, which again, I'm a chemistry nerd at heart. If you're an hour off, it decreases its efficiency significantly. And as you get to I forgot at midday, it is a whole nother ballgame of your protection for it. Not only that, it could be messing, just the hormones, as we know, can affect your mental state, your body composition. Just this consistency is so important. So that's just one person's journey of setting an alarm, setting their time, and then keeping track of how did they do when they were on time with it versus not. A lot of my individuals may not take some medications that are so time sensitive. So I think maybe some of the cholesterol medications, maybe some of our mood stabilizing medications, they just have to take it at the exact, around the same time every day, try not to be way off. But the problem is just remembering it, or goodness forbid, they have to take it more than one time a day. How do we pair it to activities that they do every day so that when they, brush their teeth, they always walk to their nightstand and grab their medication because they know that that's something that it's paired together. So, as we think about tangible goals is consistency and how can we pair it in a positive way so that you're not, oh, I forgot again, I can't get this. But instead, how can I be successful? And then giving yourself kind of that pat on the back while your disease state or just whatever have you, your symptom tracker is improving.
All right, so we're talking some behavioral science here, right? How do we start pairing activities with outcomes and making sure that we're finding a rhythm and a cadence to doing that consistently? The thing I'd probably throw in here, and I'll look to Abigail to maybe reinforce some of this, is if we don't nail it today, it's do the thing and then let's re-up and see if we can do it consistently starting tomorrow. And so there's this kind of process of building a habit that I'd love for you to maybe unpack and then share some of your thoughts on goals, Abigail.
Absolutely. And I think kind of understanding change science and the science of change, I think is actually really, can be really liberating for folks because there's a lot of shame and guilt around, January 15th. I had this New Year's resolution, it's 2 weeks in and I've fallen off the wagon, right? That we all can kind of understand that feeling of, I didn't meet my goal, and so why even try? And so I think it's really useful to think about the stages of change. So the stages of change are that the idea of change is a process. And so the stages themselves are pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, action, and maintenance. And what I love about that is that actually doing something is stage 4, right? Action is the second to last stage. And so,
Abigail, can you give us those stages again? I think those are really helpful. I'm even going to
Sure.
jot down.
So pre-contemplation, this is, I don't know that I need to make a change. Contemplation is, I'm aware that a change needs to be made, but I'm not ready to do anything. Preparation is, I'm thinking about making a change. I'm not ready to act yet, but I'm getting things in order. And then action. And so what I think can be so useful about that is giving ourselves praise for moving up, right? To go from pre-contemplation to contemplation, to just be sitting with the thought that this might be a change that I should think about making. That's progress, right? Preparation, just starting to get the education, to, sign on to a lunch and learn, to get some more information, to give yourself a pat on the back for, hey, I've moved up. I'm now in preparation. And so I think that can be really take some of the pressure off when we understand that change doesn't happen overnight, that we truly know that that's not the way change happens. And so there's nothing wrong with us for not being able to do that. In fact, it sets us up for more change, consistent change in the long run, if we kind of take it slower and recognize that it's all a process.
Oh, that is incredibly helpful. Shanika, I want to pop to you, and you've done this tangibly. You've shifted your A1C in the last, call it year and a half. I know we've talked about it pretty regularly, but kind of share how, particularly what Abigail just shared about those stages, how you did that. And then Sam, I want to come to you right after and figure out how diet and perhaps exercise even tracks with what we've just heard from Lauren, Abigail, and about to be Shanika.
Thanks, Ace. Yeah, I mean, I tried several times and failed. And what I did at that point is I took a step back and looked at, okay, why did I fail? And one of the things I realized is, well, I try to do exercise when the whole house is up and then kids running around and I'm getting disturbed. I'm like, okay, what can I do then? I'm like, it's gonna suck for a little bit, but I'm gonna wake up at 5 o'clock, nobody's up, and I'm gonna do my yoga session for 1 hour. That allowed me to kind of get into that habit and continue doing it without any disruptions. And I think that's important, that we carve out these times that we know that we can do this activity or take time to prepare food without having distractions. And that was how I managed to first get started. Waking up at 5 is not easy, but I'd rather do that than trying to do it in the afternoon and having all these distractions. I honestly think that's what allowed me to kind of break through these start and stop situations, because now it's consistent. It's something I can convert into a habit. It also forced me to go to bed a little bit earlier and kind of improved other aspects of my lifestyle as well. So if I'm to summarize this in this whole approach, find the time that will help you convert what you are doing into a habit.
I love that.
That it works.
So from a change management perspective, it sounds like you have broken things down into digestible, palatable pieces. And to Abigail's point, the preparation is work, the contemplation is work. And so you thought about, it's not, I need to be exercising today. It's, how do I set myself up to be able to exercise in the way that I need to? And that's a part of the process. I love that. So speaking of digestible pieces, let's talk about diet, Sam.
All right. So generally, when you're setting a goal for diet, and honestly, this can even work for exercise or even taking your pills on time, you want to use what we call a SMART goal. That's what we use when we meet with our nutrition clients. This means your goal is specific, it's measurable, it's attainable, it's realistic, and it's time bound. So a SMART goal for nutrition might be something as simple as you're trying to get more vegetables in your diet. Maybe you don't really like them before, but you're trying to work them in. It can be as simple as, this week, I will try at least one new recipe with a leafy green vegetable in it. You've given yourself that week, you've picked a specific parameter. It's something you can measure if you did it or not, and it's realistic. I think a lot of times when we get very excited about changing our diet or changing our exercise routine, people try to do everything at once. And the problem with doing everything at once is you can sometimes get what we, like a little bit of burnout. Like you're a little overwhelmed, or say you decide, you make a too large a goal, like I'm never gonna eat sweets again. For one thing, sweets are part of a healthy diet. If you have a craving for a cookie, doing a cookie every once in a while is not gonna give you diabetes. So letting that little bit of things like cookies and ice cream in occasionally, when you're really in the mood for it, or you're celebrating with your family, is actually part of a healthy diet and maintaining it. But setting that SMART goal to have something new that you're trying or trying to include can help. For example, with exercise, American Heart Association recommends about 150 minutes of moderate physical activity a week. If you're someone who right now isn't exercising at all, jumping straight from nothing to 150 minutes a week is a lot. So maybe your SMART goal might be something as simple as, all right, at least one day this week, I'm going to walk outside at a brisk pace for 30 minutes. You get started one day that week. Next week, maybe you're getting to 2 or 3 days. And eventually, hopefully you'll get to that 150 minutes. And since you did it slowly, your body had time to get used to it. You had time to feel good about the goals you were meeting, and you can hopefully keep that going.
I love it. So we're kind of encroaching on my field, which is how humans make decisions. I mentioned that behavioral economics or behavioral science, as humans, we have a propensity to overcorrect. If you think about that pendulum swing, we go from I'm not working out to, all right, I got to be cranking out 5-6 miles every day. And like that sets us up for failure again. I'll kind of look to Abigail to at least see if she's nodding. Like that starts to erode our relationship with ourselves if we set ourselves up for failure again. Go ahead,
And
Abigail.
I think what I also really want to emphasize, just to that point of the stages of change is not linear, it's a circle, right? So in that idea, sort of relapse or not failing, as some of y'all said, is a part of the cycle. And so it's not do it, get to action and maintenance and we're done. It's okay, that didn't work. And Shanika, you said that you tried this a few times, right? And so you get back to maybe, so it normalizes, I stopped doing it, I didn't do what I said. So I'm going to be in pre-contemplation for a little bit. I need to kind of not think about that. And then it's going to creep back in. And then I have preparation again. I have time to say, okay, I tried it before. What didn't work? How can I tweak that? And so doing that thing, like knowing that it's a cyclical process, just again, take some of the pressure off that's all part of it. That's how lasting change happens, that we continue to tweak to find the middle so that we're not in that pendulum swing.
And Abigail, if I can add to that, I agree. And what I think we think about, and I love as you were saying it, I remembered to write it down because pharmacists help with individuals quitting smoking. And we use these same terms of contemplation, pre-contemplation. And I'll joke with individuals if we're like, oh, I need to make a diet change. I'm like, are we in pre-contemplation or contemplation? Because we're definitely not in action yet. But what I like about the image of this being a circle or circular or something along those lines is that we are also changing. So as before I had before children in my household and all of that, then I'd run marathons. And so, yes, I'd run early in the morning so that when my friends and husband got up, we could go hang out and it didn't encroach upon my life. But as I got small children, that really changed and my life changed. So my exercise had to change. And so now that they're 6 and 8 and a lot of failure along the way of maybe I'll run here and maybe I'll do this. Something as simple as dog walking with them. After we eat, we go for a dog walk and it's different, but it still gives that mental health check of getting away from screens, getting out in nature and kind of slowing down and seeing the world. You also get this benefit of time with them where they do the exact same and we get the health benefits of the walk. And so as these failures occur and they don't work with your new lifestyle, adjusting them and finding a new path is a great way to continue healthy living throughout your life and realizing that just as your life changes, your healthy living will change as well.
I love it. Shanika, I know you had a comment there and I've got a question kind of in the same vein. You mentioned an hour of yoga and you've kind of shifted your day to get that done. Like we want to do an hour, but does 15 minutes work? And it sounds like that's kind of what Sam was alluding to. And so talk to me about how I make something work for my schedule timing wise. And then again, I know you had a comment to throw in the mix.
Yeah, absolutely. And guys, I didn't start with 1 hour of yoga. I started with 15 minutes of yoga because after 15 minutes, I was sitting down huffing and puffing because I was totally out. Like it's not possible. but that's just it, right? You do 15 minutes of yoga and okay, you cannot do anymore. You go and try and figure out, okay, what else can I throw in the middle of the day? Well, I cannot go outside because it's COVID. Maybe I can try a couple of push-ups, right? And it's thinking about it, thinking about these gaps, and also realizing it is all right to fail as long as I get back on it tomorrow. And also keeping in mind, I'm in this for the long haul, because if I try to overdo it and injure myself, I'm not going to be able to do this over the long haul. And those are the two things I really realized when I was trying to do this and keep myself motivated. One, it is okay to fail as long as I start it again. And two, I had to be very careful not to injure myself. So if I reach my max for that day, that's it. I'll start again tomorrow. It's fine. It's all about managing what you can do and how you can continue to motivate yourself, and thinking long term.
I love it. So I want to shift gears ever so slightly to tools. We've talked about what we should be thinking about. We've talked about some of the goals we should set. How do we make sure we stay on it or get back on it if we miss the mark a little bit? There are the intangibles, some of the mental tools. So I want to kind of talk to Abigail about how we reinforce some of the behaviors. There are some of the technology pieces. We've got these mini computers in our pocket. Lauren, I already heard you say, like, set a timer. Make sure that's going off regularly. So how do we start to build structure with some of the tools at our disposal to do that well? And do you have any favorites or some recommendations? Samantha, I'm going to kick off with you, if that's cool.
Yeah, definitely. So from a nutrition standpoint, there's a lot of different ways you can kind of get your goals in. You can do things, from an exercise perspective, wearing a Fitbit, doing things like that, using the step tracker. If you have like a little smartphone, there's a step tracker in there. If you keep that on your body while you're walking, it'll keep track for you. And there's actually been some research that says like 10,000 steps a day, which is a lot. So I wouldn't start there. But over time, doing something like 10,000 steps a day is good for wellness. Like, it doesn't always have to be you're at the gym and you're sitting there and doing it. They have a lot of exercise apps and things like that you could use. People use Beachbody exercises. They use the Sweat app from Kayla Itzines on the phone that gives you kind of body weight exercises to do at home. And same thing with exercise perspective, you can walk outside. A brisk pace is just enough where your heart rate is up and you can't have necessarily a full conversation. It's nothing crazy. And for diet, there are different things you can do. Like the USDA has the My Plate website to look at what exactly is a healthy diet. How can it help me? What can I choose? Little things like typing in smart nutrition goals into Google can give you a whole bunch of different ideas if you're just starting, you can't quite figure out where you want to go. Or meeting with your healthcare team. If you want to meet with a dietitian, you can ask your primary care provider to put that in. Or if you need to meet with a pharmacist, you can ask them to pair you with one.
That's awesome. We've got a question. I'm going to tackle that question here in a second from our folks over on Facebook. But Lauren, I saw maybe it was just you putting your hand up slightly again, but I saw you want to jump in.
My elbows up and then it gets caught in the screen, but I did have some things. Yeah, I tend to
Talk to me about tools.
Listen. Yeah, so, if we're thinking about med trackers or any of these, there's a lot of great apps. I did a quick search while we were there, a lot of free, wonderful apps. I tend to go low technology needs, and I just set alarms. And so like my alarm, I can like tag it to say, take this med at this time or whatever have you for me, because my phone will just say this alarm and help me. And it's a little less difficult for me to program and all of that. But there's wonderful med trackers. And Sam, you can save some of the stuff that I use. So as far as I do have the Apple Watch, so I tend to use that for my tracking, and it tells me when I haven't stood up, and it's fun on long meetings. You can tell who has an Apple Watch because you'll see people be like, oh, I need to reach up high suddenly or reach down low and see if they can get their 1 hour of stand. But then when I was having trouble myself, just with being home during COVID and eating more than I typically would have, and definitely because the kitchen was a lot closer than it usually is in when I would work from the office, I had to start watching what I ate and figuring out what was causing me trouble. And I did a lot of pre-contemplation time periods. I was like, no, I'm fine. And then I went into contemplation where I was like, yeah, there's something that's adding. So I tried to stop a food group and that inevitably wouldn't work. And so what I just started to do was one of the apps where you track what you actually eat. And my plan was not to decrease anything, but just see what I was eating. And then I found that I was able to find where I was taking on more calories than I realized. And a simple change of maybe I don't have, a cup of honey with my chai tea every single time can make a huge difference. And so there's a lot of apps, technologies all over there, whatever the interest is of the individuals, and it really does help.
Do we have any good food tracking apps? I'm gonna look at Shanika for that. And that was a question from Facebook. How do we track what we're putting in our body? Sam, I'll pop to you if you've got anything to add to that as well.
So I needed to keep things very simple. So all I did was I created a Google form, and anytime I'm eating something, I would take a picture and I will measure my blood sugar. And in doing so, over a period of time, I could figure out which ones work for me and which ones don't. I tried to take this complicated approach of measuring food and all of that, but then by the time I'm done with that, I'm really hungry, so I end up eating more. And I just keeping everything simple. Even just having a journal, you just had this much, and 2 hours later, this is your blood sugar. That helps because you'll be able to find out how and what works for you, and that's all you have to do. You have to really figure out what works for you.
Great. Sam, I know you got a recommendation on food, and it sounds like Lauren is a fan. Talk to me.
So there are some apps you can use if you're someone who wants to track, their calories, their protein, their carbohydrates. You can use apps like MyFitnessPal, which is free. And you can find that in any Apple or Android store, or the Loseit app, which is very similar to MyFitnessPal, just a different brand. The one caveat I will put to this is sometimes it's not best to use these apps for a long-term solution, because it can sometimes make you a little neurotic in your eating. You don't want to lose enjoyment when you're eating by tracking every single thing all the time, because sometimes that can kind of give you a little bit of mental anguish. And I'm sure we could actually have Abigail talk about this a little bit too. But generally, those are a good way to start. So if you're someone who thinks you're doing everything right, but you just can't lose weight, or you can't get your blood sugar under control, you don't know how many carbohydrates are in your meal, sometimes using an app like MyFitnessPal that shows you can be helpful when you first get started, to get an idea of like, where am I adding? Like, is it the extra mayo I'm putting on my sandwich that's throwing my calories off? Is it, the extra glass of soda I have every night? Like, why am I not losing? And you can see where those kind of foods that are really high in caloric value without having, fiber and protein and things that help your body come in. And then it gives you an idea of, if you're still hungry after, maybe tweaking certain foods in your diet might help with your fullness. So say your snack or your dinner is like, some white rice with some black beans and a little bit of spinach. Maybe looking at your tracker and seeing like, my white rice doesn't have a lot of fiber. Fiber keeps me full. Maybe if I switch to brown rice, I'll be fuller after dinner. I won't feel the need to go for that cupcake. So things like that might help you a little bit along the way.
Great. So we're talking about, being conscientious and intentional, and feeling or understanding how we feel when we eat things. And of course, you mentioned MyFitnessPal. So MyFitnessPal, probably all one word, in the App Store. And then you mentioned another app. Can you give that to me again?
It's called Loseit. I think it might also be one word, but that one too is they're pretty much the same app. It's just person preference.
Okay. And you said, be cautious of over-indexing on some app usage. Again, just kind of checking in and seeing how you're feeling in the process. I want to switch gears yet again. We've got about 20 minutes left in our lunch hour, our little breakfast.
Can I
or
give
lunch show.
one quick app rec too?
Yeah, please.
Just to, again, going back to we make good choices when we feel good. There's this amazing app called Wobot, and it's actually artificial intelligence. It's developed by researchers at Stanford. So
Abigail,
it's
can you
not
spell that
meant
for me? Wobot, W-O-E?
WOEBOT. Yep. And it's not meant to take the place of, of a mental health professional for things like crisis, suicide, things like that. But in terms of just helping you start to think about your patterns, it is truly a wonderful app. You get this adorable little Wobot, and he checks in on you every morning to see if you're meeting your goals, and give some education around some ways to kind of reframe your thinking. And so if you're feeling like there's good choices to make and you're not making them, right, you're maybe in contemplation, an app like Wobot is just a really useful thing. You can just kind of have in your pocket a little pocket therapist to help you with some behavior change.
So I want to stay with you, Abigail, actually, and kind of tie some of the pieces together. And then we've got some really interesting dietary convo happening in our panel chat that I want to bring to the audience after that. So Abigail, from a mental wellness standpoint, it feels to the average person, myself perhaps, that therapy is expensive. If cost is prohibitive, what are some of the alternatives? It sounds like Wobot fits in that category. So like, how do I get what I need without spending a pretty penny? Or am I wrong on thinking about price when it comes to therapy?
Yeah, well, I would say that one of the great benefits of the Affordable Care Act is there was a lot of provision in there for behavioral health. So if you have insurance, a lot of people actually do have access to behavioral health much more than prior to that. So if you have insurance, that's important to just check to see what you might be able to get covered, because people are often surprised. One of the big changes is that there's it's more preventative focus. So you can go for more preventative reasons, right? Which is what we should be doing, right? We should all go to therapy just because it's helpful. The other thing is, if you have an employer assistance programs, I think if you're like, as a VCU employee, you get 4 free therapy sessions per incident, per reason you want to go. So checking with your, with your HR, is there an employee assistance program? And then if you want to work, if you kind of don't, either you're not ready to see someone or you don't have the funds to see someone, there's so many great just online resources for kind of self-help stuff, so Googling cognitive behavioral therapy and just seeing what that's about can be useful. From the app standpoint, again, Wobot, but there's things like, there's a free app called Pocket Rehab that connects you with peers anonymously. It's completely private if you're working through some substance use things. There's, of course, meditation apps, things like calm.com. Some of those cost money, but there's one, Elevate, that doesn't. There's also a really cool app called Liberate. That's a meditation app by people of color for people of color. So there's lots of ones to sort of help thinking about, what community do you feel most connected to that you might be able to reach out to for help. And then I would also say there's some cool apps like gratitude journals that are free. Thinking of like a nightly practice, a way to go to bed on a positive note is a great way to wake up in the morning to a fresh day to make new good decisions. So there's definitely, I completely understand that there's a lot of barriers to seeking treatment, but there's also a lot of great resources that have been coming out. So just kind of doing a little digging to see what might be available.
I love it. So we got Pocket Rehab, Wobot, you mentioned calm.com and Elevate. Headspace is a great one as well. And for those, if you're looking for a mental health professional, I would say even Psychology Today, and just kind of filtering by your area to find and start conversations is a great way to get the ball rolling. Lauren, you're off mute. You want to throw something in the mix. Talk to me.
Abigail, can you tell us a little bit about your thoughts? When I worked in free clinics as a pharmacist, and we'd send a lot of our patients who needed counseling services that the departments within the counties had them. So if they lived in Henrico, we had numbers to connect them to mental health services. And it's been a couple of years since I've been in those clinics doing this. Is that that's something people can still do if they're in the area, specifically Virginia. They can reach out to their counties and see what kind of services are available just where they live.
Yeah, absolutely. And that has gotten so much easier, I think, as a result of COVID. One of the good things, right? Telehealth, telemedicine, there's a lot more, therapy services via internet these days. So particularly if you're in a more rural area, or a small area and it's just harder to find healthcare providers, that's definitely, still there's a lot to kind of reach through your local health locality.
Shanika.
Yeah, and thanks for that, all that information, but don't forget the power of old school therapy as well. Finding a group of friends that you can call is huge. And I was just putting in the chat here, sometimes I'm hungry and the next meal is 2 hours away. I need to get my mind off something. So I just start chatting with my friends on Facebook. And that's really powerful because it helps me get through those 2 hours until it's mealtime again. So
some distractions and some accountability partners is what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
That's great. I want to go to the rest of the panel. We just heard the kind of mental wellness approach and alternatives there. Are there alternatives in your respective fields for either cost as a barrier or just, hey, that sounds like a lot. How do I manage this maybe alternatively differently?
Can talk about just care and pharmacy. So everyone knows about the different like GoodRx, all of them get sent to us all the time. Be careful with those because if they're not, you are giving your information to them. So choose smartly which ones you choose to do if there's different discount cards. But in addition to that, if you're just looking for healthcare, and if you're a student, you always have your student options. Those are wonderful. Utilize them. They're here. They're great services. If you are a person with the new insurance, there's definitely avenues for you. If you're an individual without insurance, then there are a lot of free clinics where we have these great opportunities for you to be managed by professionals. A lot of our faculty at the pharmacy will work at free clinics because we like to give service and we're practicing on the top of our fields. And so we're managing medication and getting people's goals to levels that rival private care. So it really is one of those things where if you feel that cost is prohibitive, you just may not know the tools that are out there for you. So reach out, ask individuals what they can help you with, and don't be worried about reaching out. If you have a really expensive medication or you're on something like a brand medication, a lot of them have information through their like company website where you go in, you put information, you may be able to get free trials, you may be able to get discounted medication. So make sure to look around and kind of ask your pharmacists, ask your providers, what are ways to decrease costs? And we're used to doing that. That's part of our complete care of a patient. So reach out and we can help you.
Great. And then on the diet front, I want to jump to Sam. Shanika, I'd imagine you've got some thoughts to throw in the mix. And, healthy food feels expensive. It is significantly easier to get the Happy Meal at McDonald's than it is to go find something that probably is better for me. How do I manage that? And what are some alternatives?
Yeah, so it can definitely, depending on your financial situation, sometimes buying fresh fruits and vegetables can be kind of expensive. If you are someone who really wants them fresh, one of the ways you can save money is trying to buy seasonal. So if you type into Google seasonal fruits and vegetables and you type in the month, it will actually give you a list of fruits and vegetables that are in season right now. So they are usually a few dollars cheaper than things that are out of season. Some other techniques is buying canned fruit and vegetables, not canned in syrup, preparatory fruit, because then you kind of get a little bit more of a sugar high there. But getting things like canned vegetables and then rinsing them in a colander with cold water removes that added salt from the vegetables, but still gives you that vegetable intake that you're looking for. Same thing with the frozen fruits and vegetables. They are just as healthy and just as good as the fresh, and they tend to be a few dollars cheaper. And if you don't need to eat all of it at once, you can put it right back in your freezer in the bag.
Awesome. Shanika, I know you want to probably throw some in the mix, and then you were talking about like adding olive oil to your diet and extending like how hungry you are, fats, proteins, etc. Talk to me about how we manage that.
So agree with Sam 100% that there are cheap alternatives and easier alternatives too. I just buy everything frozen. frozen salmon, frozen fruits, frozen vegetables, and it's so much easier to just throw it in the microwave, or salmon, you just throw it in the oven, and you'll have a great meal ready in very little time. One thing about being hungry and olive oil, oils tend to increase and maintain your blood glucose over a longer period of time. And things like olive oil is also healthy for the heart. So what I started doing was adding olive oil to different types of food that I'm eating. And in doing so, it's the food itself does not give me the starch sugar boost, but the olive oil helps maintain a low hunger until the next meal. So kind of thinking about those things and mixing and matching and keeping it cheap. Absolutely. You can do all of that with what is available to us.
I love it. So I've got one more kind of question structured, and then if the folks on Facebook have questions, Madeline is making sure we get those in chat, so feel free to pass those through. And then we'll go to kind of final thoughts. But if I have some disability or can't work out physically, maybe I'm just sitting behind a desk all day or behind a camera, as I typically do and have for the last year and a half, like, how do I make sure I'm active and doing things to continue my health journey? What are some alternatives for getting on the road and running, if you will?
I can probably take a step at this because I injured my knee trying to do yoga wrong. Well, okay, yoga's out. What can I do? Well, the rest of my body is still working, right? So I started doing some push-ups, and it's just a matter of figuring out, okay, one part of your body is not working. You're just trying to burn calories. And as long as you're moving muscles, you're burning calories. Figure out what part of the body you can put into work so that you can actually get that energy burn. That's what worked for me.
All right. I love that. And of course, you don't have to leave the comfort of your home to do calisthenics, push-ups, sit-ups, stretching, so on and so forth. Abigail just dropped a great app, Fit Wheelchair, for anybody who is in a wheelchair and not up. Workout Women from Lauren, we've got a recommendation there. So we've got ample options, and I'd imagine there are quite a few ways just to search ways to work out without a gym membership, without leaving the house. If I have X, if I'm a person with X disability, how do I keep my heart rate up, burn some calories, keep active? So we've got a handful of minutes, 7 to be exact, left in our time. Again, Facebook, feel free to send us some questions, but some parting thoughts from each of you. We've had a riveting discussion. We've all probably learned something today. I certainly have. Anything to add for the folks at home and for me?
Actually,
Sam,
yeah.
you were off mute first, so you're up.
So the one thing I did want to add, we talked a lot about hunger and fullness, and Shanika told us about how he used olive oil with his diabetes to help, control his blood sugar and help fill his belly a little bit. One thing I wanted to point out there is there are 3 factors in your diet that really do help with fullness. So one of them is going to be fiber. So that's going to be things like whole grains, like brown rice and whole wheat bread. That's also found in vegetables and fruits as well. There's going to be fat, like the olive oil, canola oil, avocado oil, nuts, avocados, and olives in general. And there's protein. And from a diabetes perspective, if someone is, fighting pre-diabetes or diabetes, including that fat source or a protein source in your meal is actually something that won't raise your blood sugar, but slows your digestion because it takes your body longer to digest fiber, fat, and protein. So you don't get that blood sugar spikes. That's a good tip for anyone who's trying to keep things a little more under control or just keep themselves more full.
So fiber, fat, proteins is what I just got. And, does that works even if you're not diabetic, correct? Like it just helps us stay fuller.
Perfect, actually, for everybody. There is actually a school of thought from endocrinologists and PCPs and dietitians alike that following a diabetic diet when you're not diabetic is a great way to prevent chronic disease in general.
All right. Yeah. I love that. Shanika.
Yeah, if I can add something. So if you have a sweet tooth and let's say you really want to eat ice cream, right? Yeah. Well, my wife recently found a coconut milk, stevia, and berries ice cream that she can quickly whip up in the freezer. So there's always alternatives for the sweet tooth too, because stevia, it's a great alternative, right? But I do want to reiterate, looking at my journey and how many times I failed, I really want to reiterate, do not be upset if you fail. It's all right. Wake up the next day and start again. It's perfectly all right to fail as long as you keep starting the next day. And also, do not try to injure yourself trying to make up for the day that you lost. It's all right. That day has gone. This is a new day. You are back on your exact schedule. You are not trying to make up for anything. This is a journey. You take it one day at a time. So those are the two things that really helped me gain the staying power to last through COVID and come to this point.
Great. Abigail, I'm going to pop to you and see, it feels like you'd add on to what Shanika just said from a mental
Yeah.
wellness perspective, but any other parting thoughts for how we continue on the journey?
Yeah, I would just say again to sort of reiterate that often the choices we make stem from how we're feeling. And so from an emotional wellness standpoint, the goal isn't to always feel good, it's to know how you feel. Because often when we're trying to ignore a negative emotion, that's when we make a choice that we isn't the most beneficial for us. So just ways that you can kind of just slow down and connect to sort of think about how you're feeling. Again, the goal isn't to feel good all the time, it's to know how you feel.
Beautifully put. Lauren, coming to you. Any thoughts for us?
I really loved that, Abigail, because as we think of the medication side point, a lot of it comes down to motivation of why are we not taking our medications? Why are we not taking these dietary changes for a disease state that we've gotten? And generally it has to do with more the emotional toll of these chronic diseases and motivation factors. So just being aware of these obstacles as we come back to your, where are they on the stages of their change, and that it fluctuates. And then just to touch back, I talked highly about using my my fitness, I don't even remember the name, but my tracker. But one thing I put in the chat, and Sam and I chatted about quickly, that I want to emphasize is that when I used the food tracker, it was not to modify behavior, but to become aware of my behavior. Eating the healthy plate is the key thing to know. But when you're finding that you think you're eating the healthy plate, but it's not going the way you think, then there's something that I just wasn't aware of. And then I purposely, when I'm using those trackers, if I'm hungry, I eat. I don't restrain myself from eating if my body's giving me signals, because it's trying to communicate to me that I need something. You have to come back to motivation, which comes back to, I love the panel you all set up, not to compliment you all too much, but you have to come back to your motivating factors from Abigail of why are you eating? Are you bored? Then yeah, you need to go do something else and not use food as your entertainment. But if it's something where you're actually hungry, I eat, but I choose something that's high in fiber. Carrots are my thing because they're a little bit sweet and I have that sweet tooth. So, and they give me a crunch when I want to chip. So, finding what you want to eat so that you aren't depriving yourself, because healthy living is exactly that. It's healthy. So we shouldn't find ourselves in the state of talking cruel to ourselves or getting upset with ourselves or feeling like we're not doing it right. You're doing it right just by learning and educating and trying. And so if you're on Facebook and you're here today learning, then you're already doing the right steps. So talk nicely to yourself and see you and get your information of how you can live a nice and healthy life, learning all that you did today.
I love it. Samantha, can you wrap us up? Bring it home, land the plane.
Yeah, so I think, the big thing to getting started is making those small changes like we talked about. Wherever you are in your scale of motivation, take it with a grain of salt, think about it, meet yourself where you're at. One small change for that week is good. If you make two, power to you, but just take one small thing you want to work on, even if it's something like, you know what, I go days without eating a single vegetable, or I go days without eating a single piece of fruit. My goal is going to be this week, I'm going to make sure each day I get something in, fruit or vegetable. That's a small goal. That's an achievable goal. And if you miss it one day, you did it 5 out of 7 days, you still did it. You still made a change. And that's what's important to keep in mind. Everything is small and measurable. You'll be in good shape.
Well, with that brings us to the top of the hour for today's Center for Pharmacy Practice Innovation Lunch and Learn. Samantha, Abigail, Lauren, Shanika, appreciate all 4 of you for spending time and sharing some valuable insights. And we will see the rest of you, the audience, from Facebook and elsewhere soon. But thanks for tuning in. This has been awesome.
Yes, thank you all so much. And thank you, Ace, for moderating. We really appreciate your expertise. And thank you all who joined us on Facebook and later on YouTube when we get this published as well. We hope this is helpful. I know I certainly feel inspired to go out and, plan my one change for the week and kind of tackle it bit by bit. I really appreciate all the insight you all shared. So thank you. And be on the lookout, audience, for our next Lunch and Learn. It'll be coming up in the next month or so. So thank you all and have a great weekend. Bye.